Welcome everybody to Talks at Google. It's my great pleasure to introduce Lesley Stahl, one of our country's most preeminent journalists. She has been a correspondent at 60 Minutes for 25 years and has covered pretty much everything that's happened in the world in the last quarter century, from Guantanamo to all the wars to various presidential campaigns to technology stories, which is a particular area of interest of hers, to sports. She is the winner of 11 Emmy Awards, and prior to joining 60 Minutes was a White House correspondent during the Carter and Reagan administrations, and was a moderator of Face the Nation. She is the author of 2 books, including the one that is on sale in the back, called Becoming Grandma. So highly encourage everybody to pick up a signed copy of the book on your way out. Great Mother's Day gift, so get your shopping done early. There's also cards back there, so feel free to get it done in one stop. And she is the proud grandmother of 2 girls. Welcome, Lesley.
Thank you, Sumi. Sumi neglected to say that we're colleagues, because Sumi worked at 60 Minutes till less than a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was a producer there for many years and had the pleasure of working with Lesley on a couple of stories. It's great. So tell me about the book. Did becoming a grandmother surprise you?
Well, I knew I was going to be a grandmother,
okay.
So that didn't surprise me. What surprised me was the enormity of that initial emotion. This kind of wallop of love that's unlike any other kind of loving that you have for any other creature on the planet. It's nothing like mother love. It's its own little animal. And when you become a grandmother, you change so dramatically that your children don't recognize you. They run around saying, "Who is she?" Because you are so mushbally. You are just a puddle of whatever the kid wants. I believe that we are actually, that the word no is incapacitated. We cannot deny them anything. But really it was that initial jolt of elation and emotion that I wanted to explore. What is that? Do all grandmothers have that? The answer is most of them do. Do grandfathers have it? Mm-hmm. They do, but it's different. And look into the history, the biochemistry, the anthropology, the different kinds of grandmothers, step grandmothers, surrogate grandmothers, and even when there's tension in the family with the daughter-in-law. And there's a lot of tension with the daughter-in-law. I wrote it as much for your generation as for my generation, for young parents, because we're in this together. Young parents and their parents, we're the family. And so it's as geared for my daughter, who is a young woman with 2 kids, as it is for my friends.
So as I was reading the book, the thing that was most enlightening to me, so I'm the mother of a young daughter who's 6 years old, but it really gave me a look into what my mom must be experiencing, right. And how she comes to it, and things that I feel like can be a little meddlesome, where I'm like, Mom, I'm not going to do that. What are you talking about? And so it was really an interesting kind of insight into that.
Does she meddle?
Sorry?
Does your mother meddle?
She very carefully meddles. She's very cautious about it.
Well,
so what do you think of modern parenting?
Well, I'll tell you what I think of modern parenting, but first let me say that most grandmothers I met and interviewed, including me, we walk on eggshells. We are so careful. We don't want our kids to be angry at us, because then we fear they might deny us access to the only thing that really matters anymore, and it's those babies. So I had any number of grandmothers I interviewed, and I interviewed a lot, tell me, my tongue hurts from biting it, or I won't even lift an eyebrow in criticism of how they're doing it. And then the minute you leave the house, you turn to your husband, or he turns to you, and you say, "We didn't do it that way, and she turned out okay. We were good at it." Well, the truth is we weren't as good at it as your generation is. That's the truth.
But I think that puts more pressure on parents as well, right? Now you're so concerned about they can't eat this, they have to go to bed at a certain time, right. You have to follow the routine. It's a lot more. I mean, how did you manage that? You had such a demanding career. How did you manage it when your daughter was younger?
Well, I think my generation of women was much more focused on just getting into the workplace. And it took a lot of energy and a lot of attention. We missed a lot with our children that we regret. I think our attention was truly divided. And I think our children, you, my daughter, a lot of the people who work at Google by the age I'm looking out at here, you learned from us. Or maybe you resent what we did, but you're doing it differently. And the truth is, I admire the way you're doing it. I admire the way my daughter is putting a lot of emphasis on her family, although she has a big job. But she still is more, she's building a better nest than I did. I admit that.
And what are the things that you notice that you have to bite your tongue for? Not necessarily about your daughter, but generally.
I'll tell you one. Sleep training. I don't know how many people here have children. Have you?
Well, tell us what's.
No, I know, but at Google in general. But I didn't sleep train, so I'd never heard of it. Apparently, it's been around for ages. So the idea is, after a couple of months, you just let the baby scream and yell. And I just happened to be there when it happened with my husband. And I couldn't stand it. They didn't pick her up. They just let her scream her little head off. My skin was crawling, but I didn't say a single word. I just sat on it. I was hyperventilating. Thought I was having a heart attack, but I didn't say a word. We get in the car, because we were staying at a hotel. My husband turns to me and says, "What was that all about?" And I said, "What?" I said, "I didn't say a word. I was the Sphinx." He said, "You didn't say a word. You didn't shut up the whole time." So out of my mouth was, "Why are you punishing her? Why are you making her stop?" I swear I didn't think I said a word. And it was just tumbling out. I didn't hear myself. Weird. I know. But for the most part, my generation of parents is sitting on it or trying to sit on it. Because we want you to think that we think you're wonderful so that you let us have the babies.
And so tell me a little bit about some of the science that you found out about as you were researching this book. What is the science behind grandparenting? What is this thing that's happening?
Well, there's two interesting things above all the others. One is the biochemistry. That enormous wallop that I felt, and I felt it all over my body, is actually a biochemical response. When a mother has a baby, her brain is completely rewired, and all kinds of different new hormones come into play. A grandmother has something somewhat similar. Her brain is also rewired, not as extensively and not as dramatically, but she also secretes a bonding hormone, and so she is physically binding herself to that little baby, just the way parents do. Well, it's not the way parents do because it's not as intense, but we also go through a connection that holds us to that baby, so that when we don't see the baby, we crave the baby. And it can happen to a step-grandmother. Mm-hmm. It can happen to a surrogate grandmother. It can happen to an aunt, a great-aunt. But when that baby is a little kid and somebody who thinks of it as somewhat theirs, holds it, there's all kinds of physical changes that go on within you. So that's one thing I thought was pretty interesting. Oh, here's another thing. The circuitry of baby loving in the brain and in the body, the wires, are exactly the same wires as romantic love. They're the same pathway. So what was happening to me and all us other grandmothers is we're falling in love. We are literally, actually falling in love. And it feels like that. And we use language like that. People say, "I fell off a cliff when I held my grandchild," or "You feel just wonderful all over," or "I crave them when they're not there." So it is exactly the same animal of feelings. And the other thing I found out was that most animals on the planet die when they can no longer reproduce. So when a female stops being able to have babies, if she can walk or fly, whatever, she goes over there and dies. Except for elephants, whales, and humans. So why do we have extended lives beyond menopause? Why do we even have menopause? Well, the answer is to take care of the babies. Grandmothers raised the babies. Both parents hunted. They went out into the fields and raised crops, and they left the babies home with grandma. And so I think there is in us a kind of atavistic, granular need to help raise the babies. When we don't, we hurt.
And so you talk about, I mean, it's almost like we're coming full circle. You talk about granny nannies. What are granny nannies? Tell us.
Granny nannies are grandmothers who take care of the babies 2 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week to help their kids. And today, in this country now, with post-recession, both parents are working, and they're not making as much as one person made in my generation. So you need the help because childcare, good childcare, is exorbitantly expensive. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. It can cost as much as college. So the babysitting function is needed. And my generation is spending, here's a statistic I came upon, my generation is spending 7 times more on grandchildren than grandparents did 10 years ago.
Wow.
And I'm not talking about toys. I'm talking about the crib. I'm talking about the car seat. I mean, major items. We're sending the kids to school. We're paying medical. We're straightening their teeth. Grandparents are really contributing in many ways.
Where does grandpa fit into all of this?
Oh, grandpa. If grandmas think that we go through a sea change, which we do, our personalities change when we're with those children. I mean, with our kids, we were policemen, and with our grandchildren, we're playmates, whatever they want. Grandfathers also go through this huge metamorphosis. For a grandfather who worked very hard when the little ones, his own little ones, were growing up, they all think about it as a second chance to watch a child grow up, to be in their lives. And a lot of grandmothers told me, Grandpa's a better babysitter than I am. He's more patient, he's more playful. Grandfathers, I saw this over and over. Grandfathers are the nannies, not grandmothers. In many marriages, the husband is older, he retires, grandma's still working. So he's the one who's taking care of the babies, and he's doing a great job, and he loves it. And if he has health problems, the children are alleviating them. They're getting rid of depression. They're staving off dementia. I mean, these are actually studies that show that babies just have this effect on us, makes us healthier, makes us happier, and makes us younger. I know.
To segue a little bit, it is election season after all, and all the presidential candidates are grandparents. So I have to ask you, what do you make of the race so far?
Well, one, I actually thought age was going to be an issue. When Hillary Clinton announced, I thought that the Republicans were going to come in with a whole coterie of younger candidates, and they were just going to harp and bang away at her being in her late 60s. I mean, Bernie's 74, she's only 68. And I think that, do we know how old Trump is? Is he 69? Something like that.
69, yeah.
I was very interested in Hillary being a grandmother because when I started working on the book, she announced that she was pregnant. And her daughter was pregnant. Whoa.
It's not the National Enquirer.
That's a lead. And so I was curious as to whether her being a grandmother, well, whether she'd use it, and whether it would help her or not to win the presidency. So I went with Frank Luntz, who's a Republican pollster, to New Hampshire to sit in on a focus group. And he tacked on a couple of questions for me and then let me ask some questions. So they were all Republicans. And he got up there and he said, what one word would you use to describe Hillary Clinton? God, if Hillary Clinton had been in the room, she would crawl up in a ball and go sit in a closet. Dishonest, liar, cold. They didn't say corrupt, but that's what Trump is picking up on. But words like that, all negative, all having to do with dishonesty. It was brutal. Then he let me get up, and I asked, what one word comes to mind when I say grandmother? Oh my gosh, the words were just, all of them. Nobody had one even remotely negative thing to say. It was loving, cozy, cookies, unconditional love, lap, warm. So I asked them, now they're all Republicans, if they thought if Hillary played up that she's a grandmother, some of those words would rub off on her. And I was surprised because they were all self-described as conservative Republicans. Several of them, many of them, said they thought it would help her as long as she didn't, they said, exploit the child, meaning, walk around with the kid on her hip. I'm sure Hillary's people have done their own focus groups. I'm a little surprised she hasn't made more of it. It could be that all the other candidates are also grandparents, I don't know, but that focus group led me to believe that it would soften her image. And she's still having those words come up in all focus groups, including with Democrats, so she could use a little. Yeah. People never make much out of grandfathers. Grandmothers, it's going to be the word in front of every woman who's ever had a position of authority. She's a grandmother. But grandfathers don't get that.
Right, it's kind of big.
I know.
What do you make of Trump, the Trump phenomenon?
Oh my goodness.
Gotta ask.
I mean, I'm like everybody else. I don't know what to make of it. It's not that I don't know what to make of him. I don't know what to make of the public reaction to him. I could go through a litany of things he has said where I was sure I would have put money down that it was over. I mean, when he went after John McCain, saying he wasn't a hero, now that was really early on. I knew for sure that was the end. I knew it. Well, there have been 13, 14, 15 of those. And he always rises from the ashes, so I wouldn't dare predict, and it's even hard to analyze. But I know it. I'm pretty darn sure it's going to be Hillary versus Trump. And they're really going to do jobs on each other. It's really going to be a slugfest of gigantic proportion. Who can slime the other one more is probably going to win. Isn't that awful to say about our country? The other thing that strikes me about this campaign, and I think I've been struck by it in the past, but never so intensely, is how few people give the candidates to us. If you go out and count all the people who either went to a caucus or voted in a primary, it's a minute fraction of the American adult population. And so the process just it's not working. It's just not. We have to fix it. Just have to fix it.
And I mean, the thing that strikes me as a former journalist is, how do you report on somebody like Trump when there's no fact checking? I know at 60 Minutes, very particular, every script is footnoted, everything is fact checked. How do you cover a candidate in a responsible way who really can't be fact checked or doesn't care?
Well, he is fact checked, but the public doesn't care. There are any number of newspaper columns written about what he got wrong, television stories done about what he got wrong, and people don't care. That's why I say it's the reaction to him that's the unfathomable part of it. It's very difficult to report on him. I've studied his interviews because, I used to do Face the Nation, and I used to love to try and pin someone down. If they didn't want to answer the first question, you went to the second question. And then, if you go to the third, you're nagging, but I would nag. He's unnaggable. You just can't get him to answer the question. He gets away from it, so it's hard.
I mean, and where is the line between entertainment and journalism? As you said, if this is going to turn into a slugfest, it almost feels like a little bit of a horse race, a boxing match, whatever you want to call it. I mean,
how's about stand-up comedy? No, seriously. Have any of you just sat and watched a Trump rally? None of you? He is hilarious. He is seriously hilarious. It is a stand-up routine. And I always thought that humor was really, really important in politics, because I covered Reagan. And he was very funny, but sweetly funny, but funny. I also thought likability was crucial. It's certainly crucial to leadership, to governing. But we are being presented by this tiny sliver of the country with candidates who are more unlikable than candidates I think have ever been. Ever. Well, in time that we know of, certainly in modern time. The negatives. Whew. Trump's are he has an unfavorable rating of 67%. And Hillary, anybody want to guess? 56% negative.
And so, as you said, you covered Reagan for a long time. What do you make of the almost deification of Reagan?
Yeah. Well, he wasn't deified in the beginning at all. In fact, there's a little bit of similarity. There was a huge chunk of the country, because Reagan was very, very, very conservative for that period of time in our history, who thought never Reagan. So there was that huge chunk of the population out there. The election was very close. Then he was shot early on. And he handled that with such grace and really heroism that he won everybody's heart. And people stopped looking at him in a two-dimensional way as a guy who stood for these issues and started to see the human being. And he had a quality, and it's a quality we're not seeing this time in anybody. He had sweetness. He had a special quality of sweetness. And when you saw him, you could disagree with him 100% and like him. Mm. And it goes a huge, long way to govern when you need to persuade people.
Is the era of sweetness over, you think? Is there no room left in our
Oh, well, I would never say that. We're going to, when Jimmy Carter was president, there was so much gloom and doom. Reagan used to run around the country saying, what's with the gloom and doom? But there was. We were very pessimistic. Nothing was working. There were gas lines. There were food lines for people. People were suffering so much they were standing in line to get food. We had high inflation, high unemployment. You never thought it was going to turn around. And Reagan came in, and pretty soon, we were feeling good again. The economy cranked back up. So, these things are cyclical. I think we might have sweetness again.
One can hope. I want to bring you back to something you were saying earlier about Hillary Clinton being a grandmother. And one of the interesting things, to bring it back to your book as well, was when you wrote about how being a grandmother actually helps women break the glass ceiling. Well, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. First of all, you will observe that women in high places today are grandmothers. Nancy Pelosi, when she was sworn in as Speaker of the House, is she? Yeah. Do you remember then? You all remember. She had all her grandchildren on the stage with her. And I actually did a story on her. She ruled in a maternal way. She ruled the house with an iron fist, but a maternal iron fist, like the mother, the policewoman. She had an instinct that said that grandmother image can be a formula for authority. And so I came to see that while it's still difficult for the country as a whole, and for men specifically, to accept a young woman in a position of authority, it's not hard to accept a grandmother. Because very often in our families, they were the tough one in the family. And so I had a girlfriend tell me, she ran a girls' school in New York. And for her, she was there forever. She stayed at that school and ran that school for years and years and years. She always had trouble with the fathers. They were always in her face, telling her what to do and poking at her. And one day, it just stopped. It just stopped. And she was able to control the meeting with the father, and everything was wonderful. And then she realized that he was seeing her not as a young, sexy woman, but as a grandmother. And so his need to fight with her or to challenge her, stand up to her, was over. So grandmothers can be authoritative in the public's eye. And again, I'm surprised Hillary isn't playing it up more. And grandmothers aren't old anymore. They're baby boomers, and baby boomers are young. They think of themselves as young. They act young. They dress young. They look young. Believe me, we're tired. I'm telling you that when I chase after my grandchildren, I'm very tired. But we put on a good face. Another grandmother in the audience laughing. And so I don't think we have the same image that grandmothers had certainly when I was growing up, or maybe even when you were growing up.
That's true. And so here in the Valley, we talk a lot about diversity in tech and sort of making sure that there's representation of women on teams, and especially in the more technical fields. With a little bit of distance and perspective, what do you make of that, especially given your research?
Well, I'll tell you, this happened at 60 Minutes too, while you were there. I fear so often that women take 2 steps forward and a step and a half back. We take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And it's been that way ever since the women's movement in the early 70s. We think we're making progress in the workplace, and then we find out that we're still only making 79 cents to the men's dollar. We still don't crash through the glass ceiling. We still don't have many CEOs. And it's a bafflement. It's a bafflement that we don't have more women in positions of executive positions where they're making the big decisions, when it's shown that women make better decisions in many situations, and where women are better educated, generally speaking, as many PhDs and so forth. So it's a bafflement, and it's like a little ache, because I was there at the beginning of the women's rights movement, where I was so sure that women were just going to sweep into the presidency, into the boardrooms, into the executive suites in huge numbers within 30 years. And it's more than 40 years ago that this started. So I don't know. I keep saying the time will come, but when's it going to come?
If there are any questions in the audience, please feel free. But in the meantime,
I guess 2 things. First of all, regarding women, I think that there was a change. Not enough, but there is a change. And maybe I'm an optimist, but it seems like it's shifted from kind of the world doesn't let women do anything to that as well, but also I think the education back at home. I think parents should change as well, not just the world, not just the corporations. I think that still many homes, not even intentionally, are not raising the girls in a way that they even understand that there are options other than being a girl or whatever it means.
Really?
And I think
I'm
that
surprised to hear you say that.
I think we as parents are, at least some of us, not doing the best job, not necessarily because we don't want to, but because we're not aware of it, because we grew up, even my generation, in a way that women has,
Okay, where did you grow up?
In Israel, and then in the United States later, but in Israel. And I think that it's still, I saw a lot of conservative type of homes, and again, not because they wanted to undermine in Israel, but also I think that I see it here, that it's conservative in a way that nobody said that you cannot be an engineer, but it's not the point. I mean, we're not talking about a girl as an engineer. And in my
We're talking about having a girl being told, you can be whatever you want. That should be the message.
I don't think that's very common even today, and not because the parents are objecting to it, but it's very conservative that girls are girls and boys are boys. And at least what I'm trying to do, because nobody has a golden, is girls can be girls, boys can be girls, but I'm trying to mix and match. So at least she knows she can do whatever she wants, and that's hard.
I come from obviously different generation. I was told I could be anything I want,
right?
And so I'm a little surprised to hear you say all these generations later, you don't think that message is still being sent to our kids, because that would be a message that comes down from my generation, right?
Look at Google. The numbers that were released to the public shows that even Google, where we're doing whatever we can to get as many women as we can, especially engineers, there's not enough women graduating universities in computer science.
And you think that's the parents, really? I thought that was peer pressure.
The parents,
Girls
the
think that
schools,
boys won't like them if they go into science, kind of thing.
I think that it's indirect. And again, I don't think that a lot of the parents are doing this in purpose. I think that in many cases they don't even think about it. And at least in my case, I think about that. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I think about that. And if anyone will convey any other message to my daughter, that's one of the things that can really freak me out. So that's
Good message for
thank
everybody
you.
who's listening. Yeah.
Thank you. And if we can go back to television for a second.
Anything.
So television was always my dream, especially in news, so
You wanted to be a newscaster.
always.
Here or in Israel?
Here, this is the mecca of, and sometimes I report to Israeli television, but just as a side hobby. But what I did learn from reporting to radio and television in Israel for, let's say, 30 times in my life, that it's just unbelievable what happens when something is broadcasted. No one is watching broadcast television, double quote. Nobody, it's all video on demand, it's all Hulu and Netflix. Nobody's watching anything on TV. TV is dead and everything. But when my piece was broadcasted on television, I mean, my cell phone was drained out of battery from so many Facebook messages. So my question to you is, when you go into a studio, not even reporting from the field, today, after so many years, what do you feel when you record in studio, when you see a piece that you did broadcasted? What does it make you feel, and what do you think the impact today versus a few years ago?
I guess the thing that I feel is that I'm not sure I'm having an impact, and it bothers me. I don't know how many stories you did for 60 Minutes, but I've done a lot, hundreds and hundreds. And many of them important information that the public should know, change should have been made, and it just sort of evaporates. I feel it evaporates. So I guess people have said to me, oh, you have so much influence. I fear that we don't. And I fear because we're doing serious work. That's what 60 Minutes is really about. So if we uncover an injustice, or if we show some corruption and then nothing happens, it's very discouraging. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to you have to have the public exposed to a story over and over. It has to linger before it really has an impact. So 60 Minutes does it, and then someone else picks it up, and then maybe a congressman makes a speech about it, maybe someone tries to pass a law. It has to go on and on. So, you know, I sit in the studio and I say to myself, okay, is anybody going to do anything about this? That's what I think.
But that said, I mean, 60 Minutes still is you know, the news magazine of record. You still get an average of 15 million viewers every weekend. And that's...
But what happens? Did you ever do a story that produced change?
I did.
You did?
I did one, and I was very, very proud of it.
Which one was that?
The sugar one.
And it really produced change?
It produced some change. It got the FDA to start re-looking at some of the classifications that they had done. But no, I know exactly what you mean, where you do the story and you're jazzed for months going, you know, this is going to be amazing. Yeah,
it's going to blow the lid off.
Yeah.
Little crack, maybe.
So, I mean, that said, do you think television news should we be, you know, planning the funeral?
Well, first of all, television news has changed dramatically. It's interesting that 60 Minutes hasn't. We're still doing it the old way. We still use the old stopwatch. The way I do
digital on that stopwatch.
But it's still a stopwatch. Tick, tick, tick. And the stories are done the same way, same ethics, same standards, all of it. But most news has changed because of the shrinking of the time it takes between the reporter learning something and the reporter getting it out there. When I started, there was a whole day to think because we worked in film. And film had to be processed. And so you could really make 100 phone calls, and you could really suck your thumb for an hour or two and think it over. And then when we got videotaped, that time was shorter. And then we got cable, and those reporters had to be on the air pretty quickly. And now there's no time. And that has changed the nature of news dramatically. So whether it's on television or on the web, the nature of news, by definition, is completely, totally altered. I wouldn't, if I were doing daily reporting, say covering the White House, I wouldn't begin to know how to do it today. I mean, I really needed to make a lot of phone calls. And I needed to understand it. And I don't understand how you can just run out there. I don't do that at 60 Minutes still. So I'm kind of one of the lucky ones. But I think that news is morphing. I'm not saying it's better or worse, actually. I shouldn't be judging, but it's definitely different. And but I think the appetite for news is enormous. I think people want to know, they want to devour, and a lot of people want in-depth reporting. I mean, our audiences are enormous, and websites that are doing in-depth investigative reporting are surviving and are healthy. So I think people want this kind of work, but not a lot of people, not enough.
Keeping on the news thing, how do you feel about, the trend to so-called comedy news like Stewart and Oliver?
Yeah. What do I honestly think between you and me and 38 other million people? I think they're brilliant. I think they're brilliant. It's satire, and it's a form of commentary that people listen to. People want to laugh. We started out saying that Trump, one of the reasons I think he's successful is that he's really funny. People want to laugh, and if you feed them the cereal with sugar on top, they digest it. I did the Bill Maher show the other night. He's brilliant. He's hilarious. I used to watch The Daily Show. I enjoy it. It's part of our life now. It's part of our society and our life. It was a little discouraging to find out that that was the only news some of our children were listening to. That was a little hard to take. But as the kids get a little older, they start wanting something a little more serious. At least that's what I'm seeing in my family. So I'm all for it. Are you against it?
No.
Oh, no, you love it too?
I see Oliver as the 60 Minutes of...
Absolutely. Oliver's brilliant. But Bill Maher really impressed me the other night. They all I think they're great. Yeah.
So talking about the immediacy of news versus the writing of the book, how did the process differ for you? Were you employing a lot of the same skills and techniques, or was it a new patent experience?
It was new. Well, the reporting wasn't new, but the writing was really hard because the first draft that I showed my husband, who's a writer, he said, this is a series of 60 Minutes pieces. So I could write about 15 minutes, but to write long form like that really took a lot of work for me. I had to figure out how to thread everything together, which I could do it for 15 minutes and that was it. But I really loved working on this book. I met so many different kinds of grandmothers and grandfathers across the country. And to find out that we're all in this together, we grandparents, we're a society. And our children and how they relate to us, meaning your generation, how you relate to us, is a society. We're so connected. We're all in this campaign so aware of how different we are. But we are all the same. Grandparents, believe me, we're all the same. We all love these kids intensely. We all change in the way we grandparent. None of us can wait to see those grandchildren. We annoy our children because even if we're not saying anything critical, we are doing a little body language thing that really irritates them, and we're trying not to. So we are one big community, and I found that out, and it was very heartening. But writing was a challenge.
So you mentioned that you're disappointed that women haven't reached higher levels in professions.
En masse.
En masse.
Yes.
And one thing that occurs to me is that when grandparents are living close by to their children and they're willing to help out with the child care, that may allow their daughter to, be in her profession longer and reach higher levels. But it seems like in this world, it's a very international world, and we have people, moving across continents to take jobs, and their parents don't always come with them.
But a lot of them do.
Okay.
A lot of them do.
And so I guess my question is, what is the responsibility of women who have achieved high levels in their profession to make sure that they mentor other women or create policies in the workplace to allow other women to rise when they don't have as many advantages, support perhaps?
Well, women should mentor women, period. I mean, it's almost a given that we need to help each other. So that is a necessity. We haven't solved the problem of childcare. We just haven't. It may be one of the main reasons that women don't achieve, because they break their careers in half, because they feel they have to be home, because they don't trust the childcare situation, the daycare situation. It's a conundrum. I'm not a policy person. I wish there were more policy people working on it and more openness from our elected officials to try and create a structure, a grid, some way for families to be able to go to work with peace of mind. It's a terrible, unsolved crisis in the country, childcare. And I do come around at the end of my book to say that this is the perfect way for grandparents to end their extended retirement. And maybe not all grandparents move, but there is a huge trend going on right now of grandparents moving to be near their grandchildren. They do it selfishly. They want to be in the baby's lives. The smart parents will overlook the little critical elbowing and say, we need you. Because a woman going to work will never trust anybody as much as she'll trust her mother with her children. So for a lot of women, that is the answer. For women whose parents cannot come and be near them, we need more government to help us. We do. Or societies, or Rotary clubs, I mean, something. So it's something I thought a lot about when I wrote the book. I also wrote about surrogate grandmothering. Parents who, for any number of reasons, I mean, parents my age, cannot be with their own grandchildren. Maybe they don't have any, or maybe their daughters just aren't, or sons aren't going to have them, or maybe the daughter-in-law is not going to have it. But they can surrogate grandparent another child somewhere else. So it's a good way to take the last 30 years of your life, because we're going to live a long time, and we'll be healthy, most of us.
And with that great thought, I want to thank Lesley for coming to Google.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
And I know you have to dash because you have to get up to San Francisco and battle Bay Area traffic, but we have books in the back, so please stop by and grab some.
And this is the best Mother's Day present you can give your mother. I'm not kidding. Grandmothers are adoring this book because I'm talking about them. Thank you again.
Lesley.
Thank you, Sumi.